After a cinema release in the United Kingdom, a new film about the 90s mega band Oasis is rolling out around the world on VOD and DVD. It's called Oasis Supersonic. It's directed by Matt Whitecross, and both Jim and I have seen it, and I think we both kind of like it.
What happened to you in those 3 years? So it's a big question.
It is a big question, and it deserves a big answer. We're just lads from a council estate. Two brothers.
No, it's the funny farm.
Head cases.
Come on, you ball!
Nobody had heard of us, but we had spirit.
Jim, were you a big Oasis fan?
No, look, I most definitely was not
Okay.
a big Oasis fan, but I don't think that inhibits your enjoyment of this documentary at all, actually. In fact, I possibly enjoyed it more not being an Oasis fan. I was largely comprehensively indifferent to their music, but I think this is a really interesting piece of documentary filmmaking.
It's interesting. I loved all of their songs. I was the right age to really enjoy them. You know,
Yep.
I mean, they're all anthems, right? And that's, you can't help but love the anthems.
They're possibly all anthems up until Be Here Now, the horrendous third album, in my partisan opinion anyway, and I think it's downhill from there. But you know, certainly the first two records are look, absolutely anthemic, and even I, as a non-fan, can recognise that, you know, that they could absolutely write a near perfect pop rock song on those first two records.
And when people
Sure.
think of Oasis, I think they really think of those two first albums. You
Yeah.
know, the rest is for the purists. But I never felt like I was allowed to be a total Oasis head, because I felt that they had, you know, their worldwide audience of people who just couldn't help but respond to their anthemic good times music.
Yeah.
But then there were the specific British audience who loved them because they could relate to them in a way that has to do with class and has
Yes.
to do with, you know, a very particular piece of English society.
Yeah, and
this
that's-
film captures that.
It does, and I think that's whenever you're talking about Oasis in this film, I think the British class system and exactly what you just mentioned is very important, because the Brit pop wars or movement, or however you want to call it, is all about that. It was all about It was all about these fault lines where you had on the one hand Blur, who were the sort of perceived Ponce University educated arty English art rock band, and Oasis, who were from a housing estate in Burnage, which was in a very rough part of Manchester, much more hyper-masculine, working class, northern English, very much looking further back at a sort of kind of classical, inward-looking approach to British rock and pop. And that was really the fault line underpinning the hatred and all of the tension and press that Oasis and Blur got together.
The film uses basically interviews with both brothers conducted separately because the brothers are not speaking at the moment. They're in one of their breakup phases. And then we never see them on camera. They chose not to appear on camera. So they're audio interviews overlaid with just endless, fantastic archival footage. And when there wasn't archival footage, they've created animated sequences, or they've, you know, done very clever bridging concepts.
Well, and I think they work brilliantly as well. And again, even if you're not a huge fan of either the Gallaghers or the Oasis phenomenon or their back catalogue, what this film captures really, really well is the cultural phenomenon that was Oasis. And I think Matt Whitecross makes a very, very clever decision to really bookend and really cut and end the film at the Nebworth concert, at the height of their powers.
250,000 audience
Apparently
members.
20% of the British population applied for tickets. This was a cultural... It is inconceivable in the music industry of an artist having that kind of impact, I think, arguably.
And that was like, what, 1 year after they were signed or something?
Well, that was a few years. That was
That
was
after
just
two
before
albums.
Be Here Now, the third. That was absolutely the height of their powers before it all turned to it all went downhill. And I think he you know, similar to Ron Howard's Beatles documentary 8 Days a Week, I think it's a very clever decision to really focus it on that period, and it really allows him to hone in on the cultural phenomenon of a band that was signed after one gig with a catalogue of tracks you could fit on one hand,
Yeah.
and within months were a national treasure and cultural phenomenon.
And
I mean,
it's
extraordinary.
It's the perfect title too, because obviously Supersonic is the name of one of their songs.
Yeah.
But to call it Oasis Supersonic makes perfect sense because the film is also very much about just the extreme rapidity of their rise. They just the meteoric rise they had. I don't think any other band in history really, not even the Beatles.
Well, possibly the Beatles when they hit the US and started touring, but that's really the only companion piece that I can think of.
Because their first 9 months, it was just incredible.
Oh, absolutely. And I, but you're talking about the cartoons and what he does, and he's edited the footage with them very, very cleverly, I think, to really capture the manicness of their personalities during that period of their development. And again, even if you don't like them, there's this mania and this very, very strange hypermasculine charisma that they both have.
Yeah.
And I love the way that he uses these cartoons, which are really these sort of Ralph Steadman, Terry Gilliam-esque surreal cartoons that he uses to accompany a lot of their audio footage recorded recently and at the time. And you often have the Gallagher brothers from the earlier audio that they have, they're not even finishing each other's sentences, they're sort of starting each other's sentences.
Yeah.
They have this almost sort of unconscious relationship together.
Yeah.
Similar-ish to the Beatles, nowhere near as genuinely charismatic, I think.
No,
But
well, the Beatles
still
were
quite
witty,
hidden.
whereas these guys' humour is laddie.
They're not
It's
not
blokey
they're not
rather
witty.
than witty.
There is this odd, uncomfortable charisma about them. And I think early on
yeah.
they were so flagrantly indifferent and anti-authoritarian, you couldn't help but go along with it. And I think soon after Nebworth that tired.
Also, the Beatles loved each other, and they really, until things fractured much later on in their career, they really loved each other constantly. The famous quote, "No one but the four of us will ever understand what it's like." But these guys, there was always a tension.
Yeah.
There was an artistic tension. There was a sexual tension, not with each other, obviously, but I mean in terms of who could get the most girls. There was jealousy about who looked better. There was always a thing.
They could be quite genuinely cruel, both to each other and to the other band members as well.
Oh,
I
yeah,
think.
totally.
And look, honestly, I tied...
Like none of the other band members were ever assured of their place from day to day.
They were really brutal and ruthless in removing some of them.
Yeah.
And look, I tired of their antics as a member of the public.
Right.
Soon after the period that is depicted in this film. And if I'm honest, I tired of the last 40 minutes of them in this film as well. I really enjoyed it up until about the final reel, and then I'd largely had enough.
I liked Ron Howard's film, The Beatles 8 Days a Week, The Touring Years, but I preferred this as a film.
As a film,
yeah. Because The Beatles 8 Days a Week, The Touring Years, ultimately, I love watching the Beatles at any given moment in time. I can always watch a Beatle on screen being funny or singing.
Yes.
And that's what that film was. But this told me more. This had a greater subtext to me.
And that's a good point. And when you talk about and compare the charisma of these two to the Beatles, there's almost this desperation to prove themselves constantly, and especially in the footage earlier of their career, the two Gallagher brothers. And I think the thing that I liked and learnt the most about this film is the way that it suggests this quite alternative explanation for their behaviour. And I knew nothing about this, of their seriously abusive childhood and the role that their abusive father potentially had in Noel sort of seeking refuge from the world on his guitar in his bedroom and protecting his brother. And
Behind every great artist is a world full of pain.
Absolutely. And the way that also instilled with them this intense protection of each other and this utter distaste for all forms of authority after that. And it does, even at the height of their sort of comical, hyper-masculine bravado, when they're sort of thumping their chest and declaring that they're the best band in the world and everyone else is rubbish, there's this alternative explanation that's always sort of tugging at the seams in this film that's quite sad and quite interesting, I think. And I knew nothing of that before this film.
Yeah. Matt Whitecross's film Oasis Supersonic is available now on DVD and VOD worldwide.
Don't watch that, watch this.